They warned us never to speak the sisters' names after dark. Not if we wanted to keep our voices. Not in the hollows. Not near the ridges where the wind moves like it listens. But in the winter of 1899, 28 men ignored that warning. 28 men walked into the Appalachian Mountains, seeking game, work, curiosity, or perhaps nothing more than the daylight path home. And none of them returned. Their absence was first whispered among the villagers like a bad wind, the kind that chills your chest without touching your skin. One by one, neighbors noticed missing axes, coats left on benches, tools abandoned by the hearth, but no screams, no signs of struggle. Just the echo of what had been, fading into the hollow mist and the questions. The questions clawed at the edges of every mind in those mountains. Who were the Ozark Sisters? Women, yes, but what manner of lives did they lead that men vanished in such a way? And what was hidden beneath the cabin, tucked against the slope of Copperhead Ridge, behind that rusted door that had resisted even the strongest hands? Some say it was a cellar, a chamber, a place carved from the earth itself. Others claim it was something older, a hidden corridor the trees had grown around, the forest keeping its silence as witness. No one dared approach after nightfall. Even the bravest hunters, the men who claimed to know every tree and stone, stopped at the edge of the ridge when the sun dropped behind the western hills. And yet, despite the warnings, despite the tremor in every whispered voice, the men kept coming, drawn by the low hum that could be heard across the snow-swept hollows, a melody that was neither song nor wind, rising and falling with the slope of the land, impossible to locate, impossible to ignore. What was it that called to them? Was it curiosity, fear, or something older than the mountains themselves? What waited beneath the floorboards, behind that door, that took 28 men and left only silence in their place? Those questions have lingered for over a century, carried like smoke through the hollows, waiting for anyone brave or foolish enough to follow the story to the end. Before we descend into the shadows and trace the path of the Ozark Sisters, I want to know, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city in the comments if you dare. And as you do, listen carefully. The wind is different here. It carries voices. Some call to you, some warn you, and some will never let you leave. The Appalachian Mountains in winter of 1899 were a different world, cold, silent, and sharp. The ridges cut across the horizon like jagged teeth, and the valleys between them held fog that never quite lifted, even when the sun rose high enough to touch the treetops. Each tree was a sentinel, tall and dark, branches tangled like the fingers of someone reaching for the sky. The ground beneath your boots was soft, damp with fallen leaves and the decay of years, and every step made the air shiver around you. In the villages below, smoke curled lazily from chimneys, the scent of burned wood and salt pork hanging in the air. Lanterns flickered in the windows, casting light on children's faces pressed against cold glass, staring toward the ridges that no one dared traverse after nightfall. Even the dogs howled differently here, long, hollow cries that seemed to echo from unseen hollows beneath the earth. And then there was the path to the Ozark Sisters' cabin. A narrow trail, overgrown with brush and almost forgotten, winding past rock outcroppings and fallen trees. It was as if the forest itself had swallowed it whole, leaving only whispers of those who had passed before. Snow crunched underfoot in the clearings, but the deeper you went, the sound softened, muffled by moss and fog. until it felt as though the earth was swallowing your presence. Occasionally a wind would rise through the hollows, carrying with it a faint note. Some said it was the sound of a song. Some said it was the sigh of the mountains themselves. The notes would drift and fade, coming from no one place at once, as if they were moving around you, circling, watching. Hunters and woodcutters reported feeling eyes on them where there should have been none. Even the bravest men felt hesitation in their steps, a sudden urge to turn back before reaching the slope where the cabin waited. The cabin itself, when glimpsed through the fog, looked ordinary: weathered wood, low roof, chimney leaning slightly to one side. But there was something in the way the smoke did not rise straight, curling oddly and lingering in the air like it had been caught. Windows were dark, yet the faintest flicker of movement could sometimes be seen behind the panes, though no one ever saw a figure clearly. And the door. The door was old, rusted shut in places, yet its hinges seemed to resist even when pushed, almost as if it had learned to hold secrets tightly. Every sound carried differently in these hollows. Footsteps, the snapping of twigs, distant cries of animals, all became exaggerated, warning signals that something was not as it should be. The deeper you went, the more the forest felt alive, not with life as you know it, but with something that noticed, that waited, that remembered every intruder who had dared to tread its paths. It was here, in this heavy, shivering silence, with fog curling between the trunks and snow softening the sounds of the world, that the story of the Ozark Sisters begins, and it is a story the mountains themselves have not forgotten. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly, as most dreadful things do. The first man to vanish was a hunter who had grown up in the hollows, someone who knew every ridge, every creek, every hidden path. He had set out early, axe in hand, determined to bring back venison for his family. When night fell, and the wind carried the smell of pine sap and snow, he did not return. His tracks ended at the base of Copperhead Ridge, broken mid-step, as though someone, or something, had reached down and taken him into the earth itself. The villagers whispered, "Of course." Whispers in the kitchens, in the barns, carried on the breath of animals and winds alike. At first, people blamed wolves, bears, the steep cliffs. But when the second man disappeared, leaving behind only a pack of hunting knives and his half-filled coat, suspicion twisted into fear. And yet, still, the ridge remained. Still, the cabin loomed, dark and silent, an unspoken sentinel of what was to come. Each disappearance followed a similar pattern, subtle enough that no one could act in time. Tools left neatly arranged, hats placed over chairs as if the men had planned to return in a moment. And then the silence. Some said they heard soft footfalls trailing behind the missing. But when they turned, there was nothing but the swaying shadows of trees, the snow drifting slowly down in spirals that caught the light from distant lanterns. People began reporting sounds, strange, impossible sounds that no natural creature should make, a rhythmic tapping under the snow, a faint humming, low and melodic, rising from hollows that had no creek or river to produce such notes. The song would start softly, seeming to circle the listener, and then fade, leaving only the echo of their own heartbeat. Hunters and loggers would find themselves frozen mid-step, unable to explain why their feet would not move, why the air itself seemed to thicken around them. One man, an elder who had survived the winters of decades past, said he had seen a figure on the ridge at dusk. A woman, he believed, though her shape seemed distorted. Her hair reflected the last sunlight. though it should have been dark. Her eyes were hidden, yet he felt her watching him, measuring him, and then she vanished into the mist, leaving only a faint trace of movement that the wind could not carry. By the time the fifth man disappeared, the villagers realized this was no ordinary misfortune. Fear settled into their bones like frost, a cold weight they could not shake. Men who had gone to work in the hollows began returning early, whispering of fleeting shapes between the trees, of branches bending when no wind stirred, of soft melodies drifting from places that did not exist. Even the dogs refused to enter the forest beyond a certain point, sitting stiffly at the edge, growling at nothing, ears tilted toward something unseen. And then the rumors began, rumors of the Ozark Sisters. They were said to be 3 women who had grown up in isolation on the ridge, taught by a grandmother whose memory was carried in the folds of the mountains themselves. They were clever, cunning, some said even unnatural. Stories of strange rites and hidden chambers beneath their cabin, carved deep into the earth, spread like smoke. No one spoke them aloud in the daylight, but at night, near a fire or under the cloak of a full moon, the tales grew. The sisters had a way of drawing men into the earth, of keeping them where no one could find them. Some of the hunters began to notice patterns, subtle but unmistakable. A snapping twig would always occur a few feet behind them. Even when the path was clear, snow would appear disturbed in geometric shapes, impossible to form by hand or hoof. A faint melody, sometimes a hum, sometimes a wordless tune, would come from beneath the frost, echoing from places where the ground was solid and unbroken. Those who followed it too closely were never seen again. By the 7th disappearance, the forest itself seemed to push back against the searchers. Lanterns flickered inexplicably. Footprints appeared leading toward the cabin, yet no one could find the source. Sometimes the scent of smoke would rise, but there was no fire, no chimney. Only the smell of burning wood carried in spirals around the ridge. The few who dared speak of it said it was as if the cabin breathed, inhaling and exhaling through the trees, pulling them closer, urging them forward, whispering their names in the rhythm of the wind. And then came the night when the cellar door was first found. A group of hunters, braving the wind and snow, noticed scratches on the door, deep, deliberate, yet from inside no one could explain it. They pushed, they pried, but the rusted hinges would not yield, and yet the sound beneath the door was undeniable. A soft dragging, the kind made by heavy bodies moving in unison, or perhaps by something far older than the men themselves. The fear among the villagers became contagious. They no longer waited for the men to return, for the forest claimed them before anyone could. Every step into the hollow carried the weight of absence. Children were kept indoors, doors were barred, lanterns burned day and night. And still, the humming continued, rising and falling, a melody that was neither song nor wind, calling, coaxing, promising. Every man who ignored it became another name in the growing tally, and the ridge watched silently, waiting for the next to answer its call. The cellar itself was not easily found. The snow had drifted over the ridge, filling the hollows and obscuring the trail. The hunters who first discovered the cabin had to push through thickets, the brambles scratching at their faces and hands, the cold biting deeper than any winter had a right to. And yet, there it was, a low wooden door, hidden behind a lean-to of logs, rusted hinges worn with age, and the faint, unmistakable scent of damp earth and something older, something preserved. The first man to step inside felt it immediately. The air was heavier than the world above, thick and oppressive, yet oddly dry. It smelled of earth, old wood, and something metallic, faint but persistent, like iron drawn through the veins of the soil itself. The lanterns flickered against the walls, as if the shadows themselves had life, stretching impossibly long, curling along the uneven surfaces and retreating when approached. Every sound seemed magnified. The creak of a floorboard, the drip of water from some unseen source, the shuffling of unseen footsteps beneath the floorboards. And then they saw it. At first only glimpses, a shape moving at the edge of the light. Long limbs, almost too long, bending in ways that should have been impossible. Hair, white, tangled, flowing like smoke, emerging from the dark corners. Faces hidden, or perhaps absent, yet every hunter felt them watching, measuring, waiting. It was there, then gone, then there again, appearing in the corner of their eyes, never fully revealed. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with memory. Old portraits hung crookedly, some with faces scratched away, some with eyes that seemed to follow, stared down. The rough wood of the cellar floor creaked underfoot, each step echoing like a heartbeat in the still air. And beneath the floor, the soft, dragging sounds continued, a rhythm too steady to be wind, too deliberate to be animal. The men pressed forward, hearts hammering, yet the pull of curiosity, or something older, would not let them turn back. At the far end of the cellar, they found it. A hollow, dug into the earth itself, lined with makeshift bedding, remnants of clothing, pieces of rope, and what looked like scattered tools, items belonging to the missing men, preserved as if left just moments before. The air here carried whispers, faint murmurs that could almost be mistaken for voices. Each sound seemed to circle, moving behind the men, around them, but no one was there. And then came the singing, low, wordless, a melody impossible to locate, emanating from beneath, above, all around. The air seemed to vibrate with it. Lanterns flickered violently, shadows dancing wildly across the walls, forming shapes that suggested more than 3 figures, shapes that retreated when approached, shapes that never fully revealed themselves. And in the shadows, the hunters swore they saw movement. A figure bending unnaturally, disappearing into the walls, then reappearing where it should have been impossible. The first hunter screamed, not loudly, not fully, but a sound that echoed and multiplied in the corners of the cellar. The others felt it in their chests, vibrating through bone and muscle, a resonance that was more felt than heard. The figure emerged then, for the briefest moment, a silhouette of 3 women standing in the far corner. Heads tilted slightly, unnervingly synchronized, arms motionless. The flicker of lantern light revealed white hair cascading down dark clothing, yet faces remained hidden in shadow, or perhaps never existed. A hum rose to a chilling crescendo, the air thickening as if breathing with them. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet the men could not move. Time seemed suspended. Shadows lengthened, reaching for them, curling across the floorboards like tendrils. The faint metallic smell intensified, and the dragging beneath the floor grew louder, sharper, almost purposeful, as though something was gathering itself for a reveal, something that had waited decades for attention. And then, abruptly, it stopped. Silence returned, heavy and suffocating, but the memory of it lingered, etched into the minds of the men. The lanterns, now steady, revealed nothing more. The hollow was empty, the figures gone, yet the bedding remained, the clothing, the tools, all testimony to lives interrupted. And in the air, the faintest trace of the song lingered, a final, impossible note that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The men left the cellar quickly, stepping into the fog outside, the snow covering their tracks, the ridge swallowing the path behind them as if it had never existed. And the whispers returned, soft, almost playful, curling through the trees, drifting down the ridges, carrying with them the memory of what had been seen, and the certainty that it had not been fully revealed. Some say that the cellar itself continues to exist, waiting, listening, beneath the slope, beneath the snow, beneath the world, guarding secrets that no one has yet lived to fully understand. They left the ridge that night in silence, the fog curling around their legs like fingers trying to pull them back. Each man carried the memory of what he had seen, what he had heard, and what he could never fully explain. The forest seemed to exhale behind them, as if releasing a secret it had guarded for decades, yet still keeping the answer just out of reach. In the village below, those who had waited, lanterns burning through the night, could not believe the stories the men told. Their voices trembled, breaking with fear. They spoke of the cellar, of the hollow dug deep into the mountain, of figures that existed and yet were not entirely human, or perhaps were human in ways the world had forgotten. Some swore they had seen the sisters in their dreams, waiting at the edge of the fog, humming the same impossible tune that had lured the men into the shadows weeks past, months, and still the ridge whispered. Those who dared to venture near spoke of faint scraping sounds beneath the snow, of a melody that carried on the wind. Some claimed they saw shapes moving at the corners of their vision, fleeting, impossible. And the men who survived the cellar, though they had escaped its immediate grasp, were never the same eyes darting to the shadows, a tremor in their hands when they heard the wind, a soft muttering of names they could not quite remember, as if the ridge itself had marked them. And then the rumors grew again. The Ozark Sisters had vanished, some claimed. Others said they were still there, hidden beneath the cabin, beneath the earth, waiting. Waiting for curiosity, waiting for the music to call another set of men into the hollow. The land remembered, the forest remembered, and those who walked too close could feel the weight of centuries pressing down, a silent, watchful presence that never left. Some nights, long after the men returned to their homes, a soft, wordless song drifts through the valleys. Those who hear it know that it is not carried by wind or animal. It is older, it remembers, and it calls, calling, always, for the next to wander too far, to listen too closely, to ignore the warnings you may feel it now, wherever you are watching. The wind in your room, the shadows in the corners, the faintest creak of a floorboard. It is subtle, but it is there, and if you choose to listen, it may call you next. So I ask you now, before you step away, would you spend one night near Copperhead Ridge? Could you walk past the cabin, past the trees, and hear the melody without following it? And when the singing comes, would you turn back, or step forward into the unknown? If you're still here, you are braver than most. Subscribe for stories the world forgot, tales the mountains have hidden, and voices that whisper only to those who listen. Share your thoughts below,